So we're going to get started. Thank you for coming. I am Senator Dean Murray. Welcome to the I Told You So tour. I know this is Cinco de Mayo, kind of feels like Groundhog's Day, because once again, over and over and over, it's the same story. MTA says we need more money, and they find new ways to take it from New Yorkers, whether it's individuals or businesses, but here we go again. So it was about 4 or 5 months ago, we did our first press conference here, trying to beat them to the punch in saying, listen, we know you're claiming you need all this money, but there's a better way to do it. The best way to do it is clean up your own fiscal backyard, but don't go back to the MTA payroll tax again. We're already losing New Yorkers at record numbers. 5 or 6 weeks ago, we held another press conference, this time joined by some very prestigious business groups who are saying the same thing. They're sending the same warning, and that is, don't do it. This was one of the most unpopular things I've ever seen in political office, was the MTA payroll tax back about 15 years ago, and it's going to be unpopular again. So they said don't do it, because not only will people leave, businesses are lined up ready to go, because they've said we've had it. Enough is enough. So let's talk about the current proposals, which, by the way, we don't see. We hear the announcements. Apparently, we had a budget a week and a half ago. We didn't know about it. We have an MTA payroll tax, an increase in the budget. We haven't seen it. We've heard a few details, so let's talk about the details. $3 billion will come from the city, $3 billion will come from the state, and then we're going to find $3 billion in savings, supposedly, from the MTA. $3 billion on a 5-year plan. $3 billion divided by 5 comes to $600 million, right? That number sounds really familiar. Why does that sound familiar? Oh, that's right. 2 years ago, we heard that number. 2 years ago, when the governor and the Democrat leadership increased the MTA payroll tax on the city businesses with the promise the MTA was going to come up with $600 million in savings. We're still looking for it. We're still looking for that savings. We're still looking for any savings from the MTA. But you know what we did get that year? We got that year the record amount of money lost through fare and toll evasion, almost $800 million. We got a record amount of overtime, $1.42 billion. Is that sounding like savings? Because to me, it sounds like more and more waste and spending going in the opposite direction. So why are we going to believe that we're going to see any kind of savings here? Now, a day or so ago, the governor held a press conference and said, well, it's not really going to be $3 billion in savings from the MTA, maybe $150 million or so, but then we'll just bond from that savings. Okay, you don't bond from savings. You don't bond that out. It just sounds like they're going to dig the hole deeper with more and more and more borrowing and more taking from the people of New York. For example, congestion pricing, that was supposed to be the answer. Well, we have congestion pricing. And then they raised the fares. Now, MTA payroll tax increase and another fare increase later this year. I talked to the businesses around my district, and they asked one question. Where does it end? Well, I have the answer. It ends in other states, because that's where our businesses are going to go. So with that, I'd like to call up my colleague, also in the MTA region, and a leader on this issue. He's been speaking out on this for over a decade now, and that is Senator Jack Martins. Senator?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It seems like we've come full circle. I was elected to the state Senate in 2010. The issue in my election in 2010 was the MTA payroll tax. And here we are in 2025 talking about an increase in the MTA payroll tax. And again, the lack of accountability and the lack of clarity. The MTA keeps talking about a $58 billion capital plan for 2025 to 2030. They have identified originally congestion pricing as providing $1 billion a year, and they would bond off of that over 20 or 30 years. And they would make up the difference with money that comes from the federal government, from the state government. But one of the pillars of this 5-year capital plan was congestion pricing. Now we hear about the payroll mobility tax as providing an additional billion plus per year. And again, it's important that we think about what that means. Look, the payroll tax isn't going to provide $30 billion. It's going to provide $1 billion in recurring revenue over 30 years. We will not be able to reduce it. We will not be able to get rid of it. Once it's put in place for a generation, because this state and the MTA will be obligated on those bonds. And yet the governor announces this as part of her, I guess, victory tour a week and a half ago, and she announced that we had a budget, one that we have yet to see. But she snuck in there a payroll mobility tax that had not been vetted regionally and certainly not been vetted here in Albany. So let's talk about some of the things that are of concern when you're talking about taxing jobs. You know, we keep talking in New York State about affordability. We keep talking in New York State about the ability for people to stay here and remain here. And key to that is making sure that we have jobs here and that we want our businesses to grow. So if I'm a business in the MTA region and I have a payroll somewhere approaching $10 million, now I have to worry about, if I grow my business and I hire more employees, that I may trigger the obligation to pay this mobility tax where I didn't have it before. A tax on jobs is the most regressive form of taxation that there is. We're not taxing profits. We're not taxing income and revenues for businesses. We're actually, and this state is taxing jobs. And they justify it by saying that everyone should contribute towards the MTA and the MTA's success. Yet at a time when fares are increasing constantly, at a time when we see time and again fare beaters, turnstile jumpers in the city at a rate that can only be described as pandemic, and we ask for accountability and responsibility not only from the MTA but from leadership in this state, their answer is a payroll mobility tax, and it stops. I've been told that it's not going to apply to municipalities. I don't know. But I will tell you is this. I live in a county with 1.5 million people that has a $3 billion budget. I can tell you for a fact that that budget has more than $10 million in payroll. I have towns in my county that have payrolls of more than $10 million, and villages in my district that have payrolls of more than $10 million. The idea that we're going to have taxpayers funding an MTA payroll tax for the benefit of the MTA on the backs of taxpayers is not only wrong, it takes the state in the wrong direction. The MTA has to take responsibility for its own budget. It needs to take responsibility for and accountability for how it spends the money that it already gets. And remember, folks, the MTA has a $19.9 billion annual budget. I have yet to hear the MTA say that they're going to provide real cuts. And to Senator Murray's point, the idea of the MTA coming up with $3 billion in savings over 20 years or 30 years, depending on these bonds, is $100 million a year. Contextualize that in the context of that $19.9 billion budget and ask yourselves whether or not the MTA is actually serious about providing accountability and responsibility when it says that it's going to provide savings of $3 billion over the course of 20 or 30 years. So here's my challenge to you. We always talk about the fourth estate and the press. Ask these questions. Ask them. Because, I had a brief conversation with somebody at Newsday over the weekend where we had just this exchange, and they promised me that they'd go back to the MTA. So I'll ask you to do the same thing. Why congestion pricing and MTA payroll tax? How are they going to spend the money, and what are they doing to actually provide accountability and respect for the taxpayers of this state, something that's been sorely lacking to this point? With that, let me take the opportunity to introduce my colleague. Guy's doing a great job in the Hudson Valley, who represents Rockland County, and certainly is no stranger to the impacts of the MTA and the MTA's impact on his constituents. That's Senator Bill Weber.
Thank you, Senator, and good afternoon, everyone. You know, it's deja vu all over again, right? I think we talked about this as a conference a few months ago, as Senator Murray said, and we gave the warning signs. We know the playbook of the Democrats. The Democrats always go back to taxing jobs, adding more and more taxes onto us, for those of us in the MTA region, without any guarantee of better services. You know, Janno Lieber said 2 years ago, he reiterated it to an assemblyman from our district this year, that basically there's no upgrades coming to Rockland County anytime soon. Basically told us, go talk to New Jersey Transit. Yet he wants us to pay, and the governor, the majority leader in the Senate, and the Assembly Speaker want Rockland County residents to pay more taxes. And this tax is a job killer, as Senator Martin said. It's crazy that we're even considering it when New York has been bleeding companies and bleeding jobs for the longest of times. We have great companies coming into Rockland. We have data centers that are being built right now. We have Regeneron coming into the old Avon building in Suffern. What does this tell them? It's basically a slap in the face saying, welcome, but here you go. We're going to add these additional costs, and we're not going to give services available to maybe some of the younger generation employees that want to come work for these great companies. So, you know, we're here to remind everyone again that we said it was going to happen. We have very limited details of what they're actually going to tax, as Senator Martin's said, but the fact of the matter is it shouldn't be happening at all. And frankly, when you hear the governor and her colleagues in the Assembly and the Senate saying that the MTA is going to miraculously find $3 billion in savings, well, why didn't they find it already? Without this whole dance that we're going through right now, they should be doing and finding savings for the last number of years, and we know they should start by really collecting all of the fares that they're allowing to be uncollected. So there's a whole host of problems that continue at the MTA. We've called upon the MTA to have a top-to-bottom audit. Still hasn't happened. We're not going to stop really calling for that until it happens, because if there's $3 billion in savings that the governor thinks they can find there, trust me, there's billions and billions of more in savings that they can find if they really look and put their efforts to it. So again, unfair tax on the residents of Rockland County, unfair tax on really, frankly, all of the businesses throughout the MTA region, and we're going to keep fighting until this unfair tax gets really repealed entirely. So thank you, everyone. I'd like to introduce now my Senate colleague, Patricia Canzoneri Fitzpatrick.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm Senator Patricia Canzoneri Fitzpatrick. My district is in Nassau County, right up against the Queens border. So many of my constituents use the MTA to travel into the city for their jobs. This is a tax on jobs in our district that is going to disincentivize anybody from growing their business, from hiring new people, and as it's been said by my colleagues, it's a tax on jobs, which we sorely need to keep people here in this state. This is not going to create any kind of incentive for anyone to grow their business. What I have found in my district is anytime I've asked the MTA for trimming of bushes, putting up safety fences, replacing fences, I'm told they simply don't have the budget to do it. So why is it that they have so mismanaged their affairs that they can't even do those simple things for safety and for appearance to maintain what they already have? And you know, it's so obvious to everybody else they should be going after the people who are not paying their fares. And they haven't done that to the extent that they should. They should have done this a long time ago. And it is very laughable that they say we're going to find $3 billion in savings, because why haven't they done it? They want to continue to tax and spend, and they're not looking within their own fiscal responsibility to make sure that they cut expenses. So it's a very simple ask, it's a very simple thing, but they can't seem to do it. So with that, I just want to say thank you to Senator Dean Murray and all of my colleagues for being outspoken on this issue to try to protect the jobs that we do have so that we don't lose more New Yorkers to other states. So I'm going to turn it back over to Senator Murray.
So just a couple things to wrap it up, a couple points that were made here. One, you know, last week we had BOCES and we celebrated BOCES and CTE. career and technical education. And, you know, they got rid of the stigma that was the place the troubled kids go. Now it's the cool place. It's the place where you can get a jump on a career. You get real career training, real job opportunity. Those jobs are going to be somewhere else. They're not going to be here. Because as we continue to tax those jobs, these companies are packing up and leaving. So once again, we'll spend money to train our kids to move out of state to get a job. Another point, to the point that was made multiple times about us relying on the MTA to find savings, I just want to share this with you. We talked about the toll and fare evasion. In 2017, the MTA lost $150 million to toll and fare evasion. The last year that they reported was nearly $800 million lost. For an agency that desperately needs money, you would think that's the low-hanging fruit. Fix that problem and take the money that is supposed to be in your hands already. And they couldn't do it. So to think that they're going to dig deep and sharpen their pencils and roll up their sleeves and get to work to find the savings, that is laughable. Because they'll go back to the same old, which is reach into the pockets of New Yorkers. That's their playbook. And it's an absolute shame.